Hey y'all, today we talked about communication in relationships and essentially how do you avoid conflict or how do you deal with the conflict in relationship when it starts? How do you prevent the negativity, the criticism, the escalation of emotions, people's feelings, the anger from getting out of control into derailing the conversation. So hope you enjoyed today's session. Please remember to subscribe to Latte Wellness Group. Hope you enjoy. Take care. Bye. Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Frank Latte from the Latte Wellness Group. This is our early morning support group. Today, we're going to be talking about communication in relationships. Here we have Courtney, and Courtney West had a question for us, and her question was, is avoidance in relationships or avoidance when you're communicating, is it healthy? Was that the question, Courtney?
Yes.
Okay. I would say, as everything, it depends. I would say that what I tell couples is when you're very, very hot and heated and you're not able to fully understand your partner's point of view, they're not able to understand, your point of view, and you guys just keep going back and forth, a cool down period is actually recommended. The thing is, it's good to communicate that you're going to have a cool down period, meaning that someone has to say, hey, we need to cool down for an hour, 2 hours, maybe the night, but let's talk again in this amount of time, or let's talk again at X time. And the key is when that X time comes, make sure that you bring it up and you do talk to them again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. In regards to my question, the purpose of me asking that was because I know that, and I'll use myself as an example. I know that I at times can have a tendency to, regardless of the relationship, whomever the individual is, I'll say if I get to a certain point where it's like I pretty much am ready to shut down, yeah, I will avoid it and I will walk away, like without even being mindful that, hey, I should have said something to the individual, because I'm not doing it intentionally to be rude. And I know at times that can be taken as if, oh well, she's not listening, she's dismissing everything that I'm saying. I think on my end, where I'm coming from, I'm thinking of it like I'm trying to just walk away from the situation and avoid it so I don't go below the belt and hurt your feelings even more. So yeah. I think for me personally, I know that I use avoidance as a way not only to protect myself, but to protect the other individual. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I think it's healthy, but again, sorry, my camera went out there. It is healthy, but again, I would say that it's the communication. You want to actually over communicate in relationships. And so even though in your mind, that's what's going on, right? In your mind, oh, let me calm down because I'm going to say something below the belt, and then they're going to say something below the belt, and we're going to get into our negative patterns of communication all over again. in your mind. So you're in your mind, you say, okay, hey, I'm not avoiding this. Let me just come back to it. But that's what happens in your mind. You're not letting the other person know. To them, what it looks like is, oh, okay, you're just running away from the situation, running away from the problem. And what happens when you run away from a problem in a relationship, the other person wants to run, wants to follow you and say, no. I want you to hear my point. We're going to talk about this now. Right? I think Courtney had to step away there. But essentially, so the purpose, you actually want to over communicate in relationships. And it's very, very important to over communicate. It's very important to over communicate instead of under communicate. All right, so today we're going to be talking about some conflict resolutions as well, from the book 7 Steps to Making Your Marriage Work by John Gottman. He has over 30 years of experience with relationships and helping couples communicate and helping couples heal. Can I fix my camera a little bit? There we go. Okay. All right. So, and let's talk about healthy ways to resolve conflict. Right. So he has 5 steps, and this is going to be the first of 5 videos here. But the first one is soften your, you want to have a softened startup, learn to make and receive repair techniques, soothe yourself and each other, compromise, and process any grievances so that they don't linger. Right. So let's talk about the first one. Soften your startup. Essentially, in essence of communication, when you are communicating with someone, it just boils down to having good manners, to just being polite. I gave an example the other day where, let's say if you had a loved one, your mom, grandmother, came into your house and they actually accidentally broke a glass, right? 9 times out of 10, if you have a good relationship with them, keyword, if you have a good relationship with them, or let's say your boss came to your house, right, for dinner or so, and they inadvertently broke a glass, you'll say, hey, don't worry about it. Even when they're trying to clean up the glass, hey, sit down, relax, you're the guest, don't worry, I got plenty of glasses, X, Y, and Z, right? You're going to be very nice, courteous. But when it's your spouse or when it's your partner, let's say they do a small offense to you, you're ready to kill them. What is wrong with you? See, this is why I don't like you. You're always doing this. And we go back into that. We go back into the criticism mode. Criticism is just a general attack on a person's personality. You're not really talking about the behavior. You're really, really talking about them in general, right? Oftentimes in relationships, when the communication is going bad, that's what happens. Just general manners, just general courtesy. I tell people treat it's very interesting that sometimes, if you look at unhealthy relationships, people treat others outside of relationships better than they treat their own partner, right? For example, I know plenty of couples that, hey, they can be fighting, but let somebody on the phone call to them, let their friend, hey, Johnny, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm good. Oh, okay, we're still on for this weekend? Absolutely, okay. And then they'll go right back to yelling at their partner. So, in essence, if we just take a step back and have the same manners and just treat our partner like we treat others, like just acquaintances, I think it would just be great. All right, let's see here. Did somebody else join?
Good morning, it's Ngozi.
Hello, Ngozi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. All right. So we're talking about relationships. And we talked about the importance of treating your partner with a with some manners. Right? Basically being as nice to your partner as you are to others or strangers or, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Interesting
Okay.
topic.
Absolutely. All right. So the first, and we're also talking about how to resolve conflict in relationships. And one of the first steps is to soften your startups. Right? Oftentimes in relationships, you normally have one person who wants to talk about the issue and resolve it, and then that one person who is retreating. Some people say, hey, women are more likely to, want to talk about it and confront the issue, and men are more likely to retreat. And the research can support that. That the research can support that. Essentially, the reason why you see that trend happening is the fact that oftentimes men tend to hold on to the negativity and the negative flood longer than, let's say, women, right? It's called flooding. Basically, flooding is when you start to shut down or when you start to retreat because there's an influx of negativity, of negative things being said, and you start to feel attacked. And so then, and your partner, and the more your partner talks, the more your partner communicates, the more you feel flooded and attacked. And so in order to kind of deal with that flood of negativity, some people, what they do is they retreat because they're emotionally aroused, and now they have to calm down, right? And so those people that get emotionally aroused very, very easily and have a hard time calming themselves and controlling themselves in conflict, what they tend to do is they tend to avoid that confrontation because of the fact that it's emotionally, it triggers them, and it takes them a while to pretty much calm down. Any thoughts on that?
That's quite interesting because I feel like I'm the person that doesn't want to talk about like my issue. Well, not really my issues, but like I'm not the person that originally starts the conversation about talking about what's going on with our relationship or feelings or whatever. I'm the one that tends to listen in, and then I have to like sit down and reflect and then open up. So I feel like that right there with my past relationship, that right there kind of played an issue because he was the person that would want to confront things right away. And so it did come to a point where it was like it was a lot of negativity coming towards me, and get me frustrated to the point where I don't even want to talk about the situation anymore. So I find what you said interesting that it's really the women that speak on things first than the men.
Typically, but obviously there's exceptions to every rule. So, but yeah, it happens. It happens interchangeably, stereotypically. But yeah, in the research does support it. But there's, as in the case of you, there are exceptions, and every relationship is different. And so now, what happens is that you want to essentially, in order to resolve conflict and utilize the solve startup approach, you usually want to avoid criticizing the person, becoming defensive, becoming contemptuous, and stonewalling. What do I mean by that? We call those the 4 horsemen of communication, right? Essentially, with that one, when you criticize the person, you're really just saying stuff stuff negative. Oh, what's wrong with you? You never do anything right. You're not criticizing their behavior. You're really talking about them as a person. And then you go into contempt, where you really, really go deeper into your criticism, and it's a more harsher negativity that's built up from resentment. Right. So let's say if you've been holding up something within you for a long time, yeah, you're going to be criticizing them because now it's just every day. But now you're showing contempt, where it's kind of like everything they do annoys you, and you really have nothing ever good to say. Then you say something like, "Oh my gosh, you're useless. Who raised you? Why did we even get in this to begin with? There's no point. There's no point in us. There's no fixing you." Right? And then what that also leads to is, when you start that negativity, when you start those negative attacks with someone, what is their obvious reaction? To defend themselves. To tell you about all of those times where they're not negative, and to then, say, okay, hey, you're saying this about me, but you're throwing rocks at a glass house. What about you? What about your negativity? I'm negative because you're negative to me. Right? And then that negativity, it increases that negative flooding of just that negative feeling. And then once that negativity increases, it also creates a distance within couples, that emotional distance, and that loneliness, and that thing where, you know what, in order for me to avoid this conflict, let me not say anything. And let me just say, let me go around the bare minimum, because every time that we talk, we're going to get into an argument. Thoughts?
That is so true. Everything you're saying right now is so true. Oh my God. It's crazy.
And Guzzy, I'm over here trying so hard not to be loud at work laughing, but literally everything Frank has been saying, I have been like, why is Frank talking about me?
Seriously, preaching. Yeah.
So how do we break that cycle? Let me close the door. 1 second. It's 1 second. Door was bugging me. How do we break that cycle, right? And so that's what we're going to be focusing on for today and actually Monday as well. I'm here with you all Monday as well. All right. So, the first thing is, try not to be critical or contemptuous, right? Say things in a way that you're complaining, right? Say things in a way that you're complaining, but you're not being critical. Complaints have 3 components. They're talking about a very specific behavior. You're talking about how how that behavior made you feel. And you're also saying that, hey, this is what I want you to do. For example, if let's say you're always cleaning up after your partner, right? They leave their socks, they don't put dishes away, and all those things. And let's say they agree to put those things away, but they don't do it. Here's a complaint. A complaint would say, you know, hey Susan, you know, we talked about the fact that you would clean up after yourself, and I noticed that yesterday, you know, you still left your socks on there, you didn't put the dishes away. It just makes me feel, you know, it just makes me feel like I'm a housekeeper, or constantly cleaning up after yourself. And I think that, you know, and I would appreciate if you would also pitch in and maybe clean up after yourself, because I've been taking care of a lot of things, and then I'm also working as well. You know, do you think that you can clean up after yourself, right? Versus what typically happens is the way that somebody will go about somebody not helping around the house is saying, essentially they'll say something like, man, it just slipped my mind here. They'll say something like, you never help me out. I never get any help around here. You just sit around there all day just being lazy. What do you do for me? Why don't you do anything around there? Help me out. Am I going to be your maid the whole time? Why can't you pitch in? Why can't you do anything around the house? Why is it that I'm always the one doing stuff? The difference between the two is that the first one, you're still getting your point across, but you're talking about very specific behavior. You're talking about how that behavior made you feel. You're not attacking their character. You're talking about how that behavior of them not picking up after themselves, you know, doesn't make you feel good, makes you feel like a housekeeper, and you have a lot of things going on in your mind, and you've already agreed to pick it up. So can you just do what you said? Thoughts?
I would agree. I would say, again, for me, an example would be me asking politely, you know, calmly talking to them, being mindful of the words that I choose, and how the tone that I say what I'm requesting or asking for, and I do keep that in mind. I think for me, it gets to the point of, I'll say, I don't want to say, well, it starts off as like annoyance, because I feel like if I've already said it like multiple times, even though I feel like I shouldn't have had to have said it multiple times, especially if it's something so simple, and it's still, if it still has not happened, then yes, that's when it can be very frustrating for me. So I'll end up just like doing it myself. In regards to like this particular example that you're using, I'll end up doing it myself, and then of course I'll go back into the point where I'm like shutting down, or I just don't even want to be bothered by that particular individual.
And so the other way that you can say is essentially, when you don't do X, Y, and Z, it makes me feel this way. Do you feel that you can do that? And now, either yes or no. And or else come up with an accountability system. Right? How can we come up with an accountability system is, okay, essentially, what you can do is, okay, it really, really pains me when you don't pick up after yourself, and I have to do it, or I won't do it. What are some possible options here? Right? Is it that, hey, do we want to spend the money? And we may not, you know, but if I'm constantly picking up after myself, okay, If that's something that you don't want to do, what is something that you do like to do that I don't have to bug you? And then we can kind of like exchange and change, right? Okay, hey, maybe I'm picking up, but you're taking this on. No? Yeah.
Would that be like another way of saying you guys are, I guess, kind of like compromising for one another? Is that
Yeah,
another way to put it?
absolutely. Compromise is a big thing in relationships.
I definitely agree with what Courtney said earlier. Just in terms, I think it does really depend on how you come off and what you say. If you want to communicate with your partner, I never really. It's interesting that you mentioned it first, because I never really took it as like I'm criticizing them, but I guess in a way it does make sense if you're just coming off like, oh, you never do this or you never do that, instead of just simply having a conversation like, okay, if I do X, Y, and Z, maybe you could do this. So kind of creating that balance with one another.
Mm-hmm. Again, one of the best methods for the soft startup, right? And you all are going to probably argue with me on this one or not agree, but the research is, again, we're taking keys from John Gottman's The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, right? It has a very, very lot of good communication in there. He was saying that studies have found that by taking some responsibility for your other person's mistake, it actually helps soften the conversation and makes it a little bit more manageable. Meaning that, let's take the situation with the picking up after themselves. If you say something like, I know it might be very, it's not something that you really, really like to do. And it's something that I know that I have to constantly remind you of. Even though I don't remind you of, I would like it if I didn't. But sometimes I notice that you don't pick it up after yourself because I'm reminding you of it. Or I have to remind you of it, and it doesn't happen when I don't remind you of it. But I really feel as though, it's really hard for me to constantly remind you because of the fact that I have so many things going on. Basically, letting them know that, hey, without me, I know that it's hard for you when I don't kind of push you towards this thing, right? But this is how I'm feeling about it. And this is what we can do. Yes, no?
I think I agree with that.
It's a tough approach, right? Essentially, if you work on more complaints, I share responsibility for this. Here's how I feel about this situation, and here's what I need. If you structure those complaints, if you structure the way that you're talking about in that manner, that could help with de-escalating conflicts. Okay.
But I have a question. Okay, so but what if it gets to a point where you're taking on too much responsibility for your partner, and then it kind of becomes a burden for you?
Yeah. Then you let them know, hey, right now I feel that I'm taking on so many responsibilities for you. Nothing happens when I don't remind you. And it makes me feel unappreciated. It makes me feel unloved. Here's what I need from you. Now, that's saying that now your partner should be working on doing those things that you need, because that's how the relationship grows. The problem is also going to occur if the partner is not meeting you halfway. If they're not saying, okay, if they're not holding accountability, the relationship, unfortunately, is not going to work. I'm not saying yours is not going to work, but typically the research has shown that relationships that fail is because when it's really one-sided. You can't always be the one doing this, and then they're not doing anything. And so express to them, look, this is how I feel about you not doing this. This is what I need. In order for this relationship to work, I need you to, step it up, bring these things. And then eventually you have to assess. Can I continue living on like this? Look, I tell people a secret. I tell people, if you never want to go out of business, become a marriage counselor. Because people have the same negative cycles of behaviors over and over and over again. But they want to remain in that relationship because of comfort, kids, etc., etc., etc. But in actuality, remaining in that negative situation is actually very, very detrimental to your health. Thoughts?
I'm in agreement with you. I can honestly say on my end, in terms of the situation that I've been speaking of, I'm gonna continue to try to I'll say better myself, so to speak, just to see if it's, because I'm kind of trying to like test things out to see if it's just me, if that makes sense. I could continue to focus on, again, still being mindful of how I say things or what I say. Try not to hold things in as much as I do, because I notice that when I do that too, eventually it's not a good thing. So yeah, just keeping those things in mind, and then also trying to, like you said, continue with having some sort of patience in communicating with people in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be hard though, Frank. It's gonna be hard, but
Easier said than
I'm
done.
definitely gonna try.
These methods are easier said than done. It's very easy.
Yes. I mean, but they definitely make sense. And I guess for me, I kind of feel like, okay, like some of the things that you were sharing, it's like, okay, like I've tried this, I tried that. I'm like, well, maybe I should do it in this way, or maybe I should do it in that way. But then I end up going back to like that negative thinking about the particular person, and I'll be like, well, what's like you said, negatively thinking about that person, like, well, what's the point? It's no use. This person is not going to understand. It's just going to be like a constant thing all the time. So that's another thing that I have to do. I have to stop thinking negative about the individual.
Yeah. But I also tell people that, look, sometimes you can only control your behaviors, right? You can only control your actions. Again, there's sometimes where the partner, they don't want to do it. Then what do you do?
Yeah.
When you got to weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah.
So, and yeah. It's the reality of it. A lot of people are in bad situations. All right, let me get going. We'll talk again on Monday. You guys have a great weekend, okay? Take care.
Okay, you too. Thank you, Frank.